is News Conference Extra with Conan Nolan.
Good morning and welcome to News Conference Extra, a special segment of Today in LA Weekend. Joining us now is Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, which airs every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, joining us from his home in Arlington, Virginia. So, Chuck, let me make an argument here that we are about to enter the most precarious period yet. California particularly has done well with the social distancing, the early order to stay at home. But now there's an effort from the White House and other state governors to slowly open things up because of the awful unemployment numbers that we're seeing. If we don't thread that needle perfectly, opening it up at the right time, you not only could see the economy crash a second time, as the Fed chair said would be worse this past week, but you could have a spike in transmission, in deaths, and all the good that has been done is wiped out.
You know, what's interesting, Conan, is that if you actually look carefully at what's happening inside this task force, it's pretty clear that the president is in the minority on trying to hurry up and open things up. It's not an accident that the New York Times got its hands on government-done models by HHS and DHS with what would happen if you ease up on the social distancing too soon. I don't think it was an accident that we heard the Fed chair say what he said, that you could actually create more of an economic catastrophe by opening too soon and then having to pull back. Here's the thing. This feels as if it's the same routine that this task force did when the president wanted to open up on Easter, and they basically, by the end of that week, had him pulled back. By the following Monday, he's announcing restrictions all the way through the end of April. The same thing is happening here. You see again. Now, this is a competition between those that the president is surrounded by in the task force and those that the phone calls that the president takes from his friends outside of government. And obviously, the people he talks to outside of government want to hurry up and open yesterday. So those are the two competing factions, and it's all with the president here. It does look as if they're going to try to come up with something on May 1 to open. Take a look at what Italy's doing, though. Italy is both extended their order to May 3rd, but then added new businesses that can open up. So in some ways, we get to watch this experiment in Italy for the next 2 weeks to see if a little bit of opening up impacts that curve.
We should point out, though, that whereas the president routinely talks about reopening up society, he hasn't closed anything. This is not, there are guidelines from the federal government.
Right.
It is up to mayors and it's up to governors. And so you could have, again, a great disparity in how the chief administrative officers for each of the 50 states decides to essentially change the order and open up for business.
Well, and it's going to, and that, look, we could easily see a scenario where New York and California both stay with their very restrictive orders. Florida and Texas may open all the way up. Florida may end up having where South Florida is really restrictive, but the governor allows the rest of the state to sort of open up. And what does that odd patchwork do? Ultimately, though, this is in the hands of us. And when I mean by us here, Conan, us, the American people, ultimately, the American people have gone through the social distancing better than I thought that they would. And there does seem to be real fear out there about the virus. So the president may want to open up the economy sooner than others do, but the public may not be ready. I mean, you look at the polling I've seen, it's 70 and 80% accept and approve. They don't love these orders, but they get that they work. And I think the fact that we're seeing that it works, we see the worst case scenario that we could all be facing in New York if you don't live in New York. At the same time, we see that you in California, you've got your arms wrapped around the problem. You're not over it, but you've got your arms wrapped around it. Why? Because you guys have been doing these draconian measures. So I think the public is basically a little bit ahead of the president here.
And finally, when you look at the daily briefing, the Wall Street Journal editorial board, of all people, went after the president. We understand that some of his advisors on the Republican Party side are saying, listen, this is doing you no good. But then there's the suggestion that he can't help himself. He needs a TV show. That is the TV show every day that he can MC for the most part. And then But the downside is that it would seem to me the public stops seeing him as the person who's helping navigate them through this crisis, but is actually part of the crisis. He's sort of the incumbent virus.
Look, the Wall Street Journal editorial, that was a panic. That is them sounding the alarm for basically the establishment wing of the Republican Party. This is Lindsey Graham sounding the alarm, saying you could bring us all down. Don't forget, you are the Republican Party now. It is one. And so I think this is a whole bunch of entities concerned that the president's handling of this crisis. Ultimately, I think Lindsey Graham is right. The president's opponent is not Joe Biden anymore. The president's opponent is this virus and himself. And so, but he will impact everybody else below the ballot. I think this was not because people think he's doing a poor job at these briefings. This is, they realize it's becoming a political problem for them and for the party as a whole. I mean, look, Mike Francesa, the sports radio guy, still says he's for Trump. But to me, he gave voice to this person when he said, what are you doing with the My Pillow guy? I need to know information. I don't think the public has a lot of patience for his games, even those that like his games.
Who's on the program?
Well, we're going to be talking to the head of the FDA, Dr. Hahn, part of the task force. Basically, my obsession is testing, 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 and then we're going to actually do a deeper dive on why is it we've still not been able to test 1% of the population, and can we trust these antibodies tests? Because so far, it looks like a mixed bag.
Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, 8 o'clock Sunday morning. Thank you very much, and stay well.
Thank you. Thanks.
On NBC4's news conference at 9 o'clock, we talk with Janet Napolitano, the president of the University of California, about the UC system. When will students be allowed back in class? We'll also talk to the Surgeon General of California about this crisis, a leading expert from UCLA on what needs to be done in terms of testing before we open everything up, and a young woman who's now a new doctor at Boston's Massachusetts General Hospital. She's in the middle of it. Some of the advice she has for people her own age about taking this crisis seriously. That's at 9 o'clock, NBC4's news conference following Meet the Press. We'll see you then.